Hi, you are watching Reddit Stories.
I never thought I would be the kind of person who cheats to survive. Not because I believed I was morally above it, but because I used to think I would never be desperate enough to need to. Somewhere along the way that changed, and by the time I noticed, I was already too far gone to stop. I had just turned 34 when things really started to unravel. I was unemployed, behind on rent, and barely holding my relationship together with a woman who deserved a better man than the one I had become. Her name was Emily, and she had stood by me longer than anyone ever had. Too long, in fact. Long enough for her patience to turn into quiet resentment. I could see it in her eyes every time I told her I was working on another freelance contract or waiting on a client payment. Lies layered on lies, so ordinary and practiced that I almost believed them myself. Most days I sat at my desk staring at job listings I had no real interest in. The rest of the time, I browsed online forums, mostly tech subreddits and dark crypto corners of the internet, where people bragged about gaming systems and exploiting bugs. I didn't see myself as one of them, not yet, but I watched, fascinated. It was like peering through a window into a darker version of my world. Then came the night I stumbled across a thread discussing a new crypto casino that had recently launched. It offered big bonuses for new users, minimal verification checks, and had what one commenter described as broken RNG logic. Random number generators are the heart of all digital gambling. If they're flawed, even slightly, they can be predicted. I knew this better than most, because years ago, I had helped build something similar. Nothing illegal, but close enough to know how to spot weaknesses. Out of curiosity, I signed up with $20 worth of Ethereum and played a few hands of blackjack. The interface was clunky. The animations lagged. But what caught my attention wasn't the gameplay, it was the way the cards fell. After an hour of clicking and logging results, I noticed certain patterns repeating. Subtle, but there. The kind of thing most players would chalk up to chance. But I saw it for what it was, a system bleeding at the seams. That night I stayed up until 4 a.m., building a script that could track the hands and place statistically favorable bets. Nothing groundbreaking, just basic analysis and response logic, but enough to give me a small edge. I told myself it was just an experiment, a test of skill, a challenge. The next night I turned $20 into $137. The night after that it became $400. I didn't touch any of it for a while. I just watched the numbers grow. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting on anyone else. No interviews, no clients, no gatekeepers. Just code, probability, and me. At first, I tried to keep things modest. I played under the radar, never withdrawing more than a few hundred at a time. But the casino kept offering new user bonuses tied to referrals and fresh accounts. So I started creating them. Dozens of fake profiles. I automated the whole process name generation, email creation, wallet setup, even identity spoofing to pass their bare minimum checks. It was like building a machine whose only purpose was to funnel money into my wallet. I justified every step as I went. I wasn't stealing, I told myself. I was exploiting a flaw in a system designed to exploit people. I wasn't hurting anyone. The house always wins, right? This time, the house was just losing a little. Emily noticed the change almost immediately. I started paying bills on time again. I bought real groceries instead of frozen junk. I even surprised her with new clothes, claiming it was a bonus from a contract gig. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I think she wanted to believe me, because the alternative was admitting that the man she lived with was slipping into something darker. We used to spend evenings together, watching shows or going for walks. Now I stayed up late with the glow of my screen burning into my retinas. I told her I had a deadline. I told her I was on a call. I told her anything that would keep her from seeing what I was really doing. Siphoning unearned money through a pipeline of fake identities, burner wallets, and layered deception. I thought I could keep the lie contained, that it would stay in its own little corner of my life. But it didn't. It grew. The more I earned, the more I wanted. The thrill of watching the balance tick upward became an addiction. I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped thinking about whether Emily would understand. I convinced myself she didn't need to know. The money didn't change me overnight. It changed me slowly, in ways that felt natural at first. I upgraded my laptop. I started ordering takeout more often. I paid off my credit card balance and left the account open just in case. I still lived in the same apartment. I still wore the same hoodie most days. But inside, I had started to believe that I was smarter than the world. Smarter than the people who followed the rules. Smarter than the people who would call what I was doing cheating. I didn't realize it then, but I had already crossed the line. Not because of the money or the fake accounts or the automation. I crossed it the moment I decided that I didn't care who got hurt, as long as I got ahead. I stopped thinking about consequences. I stopped thinking about Emily as someone I owed honesty to. I started thinking of her as someone who might interfere. Looking back now, I see how the foundation was already cracking, not just in my relationship, but in me. I had built a life on deception and called it survival. I had abandoned everything I once believed about fairness and integrity and convinced myself it was temporary. Just a phase, just until things stabilized. But things never stabilize when the lie is working. You don't stop because it's wrong. You only stop when it falls apart, and mine hadn't fallen apart yet. So I kept going. The second version of the script was where things really took off. I rewrote most of the logic, optimized it for speed, and connected it directly to a lightweight betting client that let it place wagers without my input. I didn't even need to be there. It could simulate dozens of users, run 24/7, and feed directly into my Mixer wallet. The beauty of it was how boring it was. No flashy hacks, no brute force, just pattern detection, probability, and timing. I stopped playing the games myself. Watching them felt inefficient. My time was better spent building, tweaking, scaling. I set up virtual machines to host accounts in different regions. Each instance had its own name, wallet, browser fingerprint. I'd learned enough to mimic the behaviors of real people, random delays between actions, betting variation, minor losses to seem human. I was building ghosts, and they were working harder than I ever had. The money flowed faster now. What started as a few hundred a week became several thousand. I stopped counting after the first 20,000. It didn't feel like income. It felt like points. I had reduced success to a number, and the only rule was to make it grow. I told Emily I had picked up consulting gigs, something in fintech. She didn't press for details, at least not at first. She liked seeing me less stressed, more energetic. I cooked a few meals. I even cleaned the apartment once. All of it designed to make her stop wondering. I thought I could compensate for lying by being functional, as if taking out the trash could erase the secrecy. I started keeping multiple phones, one for Emily, one for work, and one for everything else. It became a ritual. Wake up, check wallets, check logs, make sure none of the accounts had been flagged. Rotate IPs, refresh the scripts, scan forms to see if the casino was onto anything. Then check in with Emily, make coffee, pretend to be normal. I got better at pretending than I'd like to admit. I'd be sitting across from her at the table, nodding at whatever she was saying, while mentally calculating the latency of my betting cycle or wondering if I needed to rotate one of the digital identities I was using. She'd tell me about a friend's wedding or something that happened at work, and I'd offer the right facial expression at the right time, like an actor in a role I didn't audition for. Some nights I would look at her and feel something close to guilt, but I always found a way to smother it. I told myself I was doing this for us, that the money would buy us freedom, that when I hit some arbitrary number 50,000, 100, maybe more, I'd come clean, or at least I'd stop. Then I could tell her I'd saved it through investments or inheritance or some startup payout she never knew about. Lies layered so thick I almost believed them. She asked questions, of course. She wasn't stupid. She noticed the late nights, the way I flinched when my burner buzzed, the fact that I was evasive about details. But trust is strange. People want to believe the ones they love, even when the evidence piles up. I gave her just enough truth to blur the edges of the lie, and she let me. Eventually, I stopped seeing her as part of my life and started seeing her as something adjacent to it, like a soft echo of the person I used to be. She didn't belong in the world I was building, the one filled with code, cash flow, and criminal shadows. She was from a world where people earned money, talked about their days, fought about groceries. I had moved beyond that, or so I thought. What I hadn't realized was that everything I was building was fragile. It only worked because it hadn't been noticed yet. Every fake identity, every wallet, every betting cycle, it all hung together on the assumption that I was invisible. But no one stays invisible forever. The casino I had been exploiting started changing things. Random bet verifications, new CAPTCHA tests, wallet hold delays. Nothing serious yet, but enough to show they knew something was wrong. A few of my ghost accounts were banned. One of my withdrawal requests bounced and required manual review. My scripts still worked, but the margins were shrinking. I adapted quickly, but the unease stayed with me. Around this time, I was invited into a private Discord group. Smaller, more elite. These weren't kids bragging about free spins. They were people who treated financial exploitation like a job. Most of them used the term advantage play, as if adding a label could erase the stench. There were people in there running credit card farms, laundering crypto through gaming sites, even developing tools to auto-pass KYC verifications using deepfake IDs. I thought I was smart before. These people made me feel like an amateur. I learned how to spread my money across multiple chains, how to use mixers without raising red flags, how to create shell wallets that looked organic. It was technical, addictive, and it fed something dark in me. Not just greed, but pride. I felt like I had unlocked the hidden level of the game. Everyone else was grinding in the light. I was flying in the dark, unseen and untouchable. Meanwhile, Emily was slipping away. Not all at once, but in layers. She started spending more time at work. She went to sleep before I did, woke up before I did, and barely looked at me when we passed in the kitchen. I could tell she wanted to say something. Maybe she had for a while. But I had trained myself to ignore discomfort. I had silenced the part of me that once cared about emotional honesty. The only thing I cared about was the balance. I remember one night clearly. I was sitting at my desk, watching a new script run on a casino I hadn't hit before. It was winning steadily, almost elegantly. In the other room, I heard Emily crying. Not loud, not desperate, just quietly, like someone who knew there was no point in making noise anymore. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just turned the volume down and kept watching the code. That was the moment I became someone else. Or maybe I just finally saw what I had already become. In the weeks that followed, my earnings passed $100,000. It should have felt like a milestone. Instead, it felt like a deadline. The more I made, the more exposed I felt. I started checking over my shoulder when I walked outside. I turned off location services on every device. I scrubbed metadata from files before uploading. I deleted and recreated entire wallets every few days. I set up cold storage. I got used to moving money in silence. I still saw Emily most days, but I had already stopped being with her. She was the last part of my old life that remained, and I treated her like a piece of furniture I couldn't bring myself to throw away. She didn't deserve that. She deserved honesty, respect, maybe even love. But I couldn't give her those things anymore. I had built something too large and too fragile. There was no room for real connection anymore. Only control. The worst part is that I didn't feel bad about it. Not then. I felt powerful. I had created something out of nothing, turned thin air into currency, outsmarted systems designed to prey on people like me. I had reversed the rules. I had won. But winning like that doesn't feel good. Not for long, and it doesn't last. I thought I was building freedom. But all I was really doing was building the walls of my own prison. And deep down, I think I already knew it. It was around this time that the two versions of me fully separated. There was the version that sat across from Emily at breakfast, who answered messages from her mother, who showed up at family dinners and smiled and nodded and talked about work like it was real. Then, there was the other version, the one that existed in fragments scattered across the internet, hiding behind VPNs, wallet hashes, aliases, burner phones, and synthetic IDs. That second version of me was the one I liked better. It was cleaner, more efficient, less burdened by guilt or conversation. It didn't have to pretend, just had to function. Managing both became a full-time job. Every action required planning. Which phone to answer, which browser to use, what IP region to assign before logging into a platform. I stopped seeing it as deception and started seeing it as design. That was how I justified it. I wasn't lying to anyone, I was just optimizing reality. Emily would ask me how my day was, and I'd give her some vague summary. Something about meetings or onboarding a client. She would nod and look at me like she was hoping to catch something I wasn't saying. I made sure to never give her anything. Not out of cruelty, but because I was afraid of what she'd find if she kept looking. I'd built too much on lies. If even one truth slipped through, the rest might collapse. My real days were spent watching numbers tick and ledgers update. I followed my bot network across multiple sites, tracking win rates, flag risks, platform patches. I joined 3 more private servers where people shared exploits and code. I wasn't the best among them, but I was fast, and I adapted quickly. Some of the others were into darker stuff, phishing schemes, ransomware payloads, real theft. I stayed out of that. I still had rules, or so I told myself. I wasn't stealing. I was just gaming the system. I repeated that thought every night before bed, like a prayer for the morally bankrupt. I automated more of the operation, which meant I had less to do each day. That's when I realized how hollow the whole thing had become. I wasn't even chasing money anymore. I was just maintaining momentum. There was no end goal, no target number that would make me stop. I had become addicted not to wealth, but to control. Meanwhile, Emily was becoming quieter. Her voice had changed, softer and slower, like she didn't want to wake whatever beast I had become. She stopped asking questions. She didn't want the answers. I didn't blame her. At some point, love becomes fatigue. She had reached that point, and I was too numb to care. We slept in the same bed but lived in separate worlds. I'd lie awake long after she had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying the risk logs in my mind, wondering how many more weeks I could keep this going. My body was tired, but my mind never stopped. Every notification made my heart jump. Every new patch deployed by a casino felt like a warning shot. I started using stimulants to stay sharp. Not hard drugs, just prescription meds I got from a guy in one of the servers. Modafinil, some off-brand ADHD stuff. It worked until it didn't. I'd crash hard after 36 hours awake, then sleep like a corpse for a day. I told Emily I was just stressed. She didn't argue. We had stopped arguing altogether. Arguments require investment. We were past that. One afternoon, I returned from a walk to find her sitting in the living room, holding one of my burner phones. She wasn't crying, just sitting there, staring at the lock screen, like it was a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. I stood there for a second, unsure if I was supposed to explain or deny or confess, but she didn't ask anything. She just set the phone down and walked into the bedroom. She closed the door. She didn't slam it. That silence hurt more than anything she could have said. I took the phone back and reset it, deleted everything, erased the past like it could erase the present. That night, she barely looked at me. She cooked for herself, ate alone. I sat at my desk and watched the bots cycle through another round of bets. The wallet balance ticked up slowly and differently. Money doesn't care who you are. It doesn't miss you. It doesn't ask you to be better. It wasn't long before I stopped pretending at all. I stayed in my corner of the apartment, headphones on, screen glowing, a blanket over the window to block sunlight. I answered only what I had to. I still told her I loved her when she said it, but I didn't feel anything when I did. I think I had convinced myself that emotions were a liability, something that belonged to my old life. A life where I earned a salary, asked for help, believed in fairness. My world was made of numbers now. Transactions, hashes, balances, percentages. I watched strangers lose money on the very platforms I was draining. I saw deposits spike during holidays. I saw new users get pulled in by flashing banners and free spins. Some of those users were probably people like me, desperate, scared, looking for a way out. I didn't think about them for long. I didn't want to see myself in their losses. Then the message came. It was a simple line of text sent to a Proton Mail address I hadn't used publicly. Just a few words that stopped my heart. "You're not as invisible as you think." I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide if it was a threat, a bluff, or a glitch. There was no name, no demand, no follow-up, just the knowledge that someone knew. I wiped the device, disconnected my hot wallets, rotated all my IP addresses, burned 3 accounts that might have been exposed, but the seed had been planted. For the first time, I felt afraid. That night, Emily didn't come home. I waited until midnight, then 2 a.m., then stopped waiting. I didn't call. I didn't message. I just sat there alone in the quiet hum of machines, wondering if this was the moment it all ended. I opened one of the wallets and stared at the balance. Over 150,000 in stablecoins, untouched, enough to change most people's lives. But it didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like evidence. By the time the sun came up, I knew she wasn't coming back. And I didn't blame her. I had stopped being someone she could stay with. Maybe I had stopped being someone altogether. I logged into my servers and watched the bots run one more cycle. I told myself I just needed to make a little more. Just one more withdrawal. Just enough to get clear. But I wasn't getting clear. I was getting buried, and I had built the shovel myself. She didn't slam the door when she left. That's what stayed with me more than anything. The silence. I always thought endings came with noise, with shouting or broken things or accusations hurled across a room. But sometimes endings happen in complete quiet. You walk out of the bathroom and find half the closet empty. The shoes are gone, the chargers, the toothbrush. A subtle emptiness that announces itself louder than words ever could. I didn't look for a note because I knew there wouldn't be one. She had already said everything she needed to in the months leading up to that morning. Not through words, but through absence. The questions she stopped asking. The affection that disappeared in phases. The way she started flinching when I reached for her hand. By the time she left, I had already lost her. Her physical absence was just the final form of something that had been hollow for a long time. I stood there in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at the half-made bed and the drawers she had left open. It wasn't dramatic. It was efficient. She had packed quietly, probably while I slept, and vanished without ceremony. I didn't even know where she went. I didn't call. I didn't send a message. Not because I didn't care, but because I had no idea what I would say. I sat down in the chair she used to curl up in and tried to feel something. Anger, grief, regret. But all I felt was weight. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes everything else feel flat. I looked around the apartment and realized how empty it already was, even when she had been here. I had driven her out long before her suitcase crossed the threshold. I just hadn't noticed. I checked my wallets like I always did, not because I needed to, but because it was habit. The balances were healthy. Another few thousand had come in overnight. The bots were still running. Everything I had built was still functioning perfectly. But it felt different now. Sterile, mechanical, bloodless. There was no thrill left, only inertia. I wandered through the apartment like a stranger. Her scent was still in the blankets. A mug she always used sat in the sink. Her name was still on some of the mail on the counter. Traces of a life I had neglected to maintain. I thought I had been building freedom, but I had been building a system designed to keep everyone out, including her. For a few days, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. I kept the routines going. Logged in, checked logs, adjusted the script margins, reviewed threat reports. But there was no distraction deep enough to smother the quiet. The silence became suffocating. Every time I opened a wallet, I thought about what it had cost. Not in effort, not in time, but in trust, in love, in being seen. The worst part wasn't that I lied. It was that I became someone who didn't think the truth mattered anymore. I used to imagine a future with her. A house, maybe. A dog. Quiet mornings where we both read in the same room and didn't have to say anything to feel close. That version of us had already died long ago, but I hadn't had the courage to bury it. Now it was buried for me. I scrolled back through our old messages, photos, voice memos. I listened to her laugh in a recording I had forgotten I saved. It sounded like someone I had never truly deserved. She had loved me when I had nothing, when I was lost, when I had every chance to turn things around, and I repaid her with silence and secrets. I wondered how long she had known. Maybe she'd found one of the burner wallets. Maybe she had seen a log I forgot to hide. Or maybe she just saw it in me, the way I had stopped looking at her, the way I had started speaking like everything was temporary. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but nothing came. Just this heavy ache behind my ribs, like grief without form. I stayed up all night staring at the ceiling, thinking about the moment I crossed the line and whether there had ever been a way back. The next day, I opened one of my cold wallets and stared at the total. 163,000 in crypto. Technically, more than enough to start over. I could disappear if I wanted to, move somewhere cheap, change my name, live quietly. No one had found me yet. The system still worked. But the money didn't feel like anything anymore. It didn't open doors. It didn't give me peace. It was just numbers. Dead, hollow numbers that couldn't hold me or look me in the eye or tell me I wasn't broken. I didn't stop, of course. That would have been the sane thing. Instead, I scaled up. More bots, more accounts, more chains. I dove deeper into the world I had built because it was the only place where I still felt in control. The only place where I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. I told myself I was just buying time, that I would quit when the moment was right, that I would cash out, go clean, build something honest. I wrote plans on sticky notes I never followed. I watched YouTube videos about expat life and offshore banking. I told myself lies I no longer believed. I didn't hear from her again. Not a call, not a text. She had vanished completely. She must have blocked me. That was her way. Clean breaks, no drama. She had always been braver than me. I didn't deserve closure. She owed me nothing. But I still waited. Part of me still hoped she'd come back, even just to say goodbye. She never did. After a week, I packed up some of her things and put them in a box. I thought about leaving it outside her office or mailing it to her mother's address. But I couldn't bring myself to move. I just kept the box by the door, like a monument to a life I had traded away. And still, the money came in. And still, I kept taking it. And still, I told myself, I hadn't lost everything. Even as the silence screamed louder than ever. It came in the early morning, when the sky was still gray and the apartment smelled like dust and silence. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night running scripts on a new chain that had just launched a gambling protocol. It was a low-volume market, sloppy with its verification. Exactly the kind I hunted for now. The bots were working well, too well. I had already pulled in $3,000 in stablecoins before the sun rose. I was watching the logs update when I saw it. Not in the wallet, not in a bot window. In my personal email, the one I never used, the one I'd kept clean. A Proton Mail account I had created long before all this started, back when I still separated things. It was supposed to be air-gapped from everything else, but someone had found it. The subject line was plain. No threats, no demands. Just a sentence I'd seen before, but never directed at me. You're not as invisible as you think. That was all. No signature, no context, just those words. I read them twice, then a third time. There was no trace of where it came from. Proton Mail is anonymous by design, but whoever sent it wasn't guessing. They knew, and they wanted me to know they knew. My heart didn't race. It stopped, just long enough for a sick kind of calm to settle in. I'd always known this was a possibility. No system is flawless. No trail is truly untraceable. I had relied on complexity, speed, and volume to stay ahead. But I had never prepared for someone watching quietly from the other side. I closed the window, opened a secure terminal, and started checking everything. Wallet histories, IP logs, browser fingerprints. I dumped and rotated every burner, shut down half the bot instances, torched 3 backup accounts and rebuilt them from scratch. I moved funds through 2 mixers and split them across 4 chains. I took no chances. The process took hours, but I felt nothing while doing it. No panic, no fear. Just a methodical, detached focus. Like cleaning up after a break-in where nothing was stolen, only proof left behind that someone had been there. I knew better than to reply. Whoever sent the message didn't want to talk. They wanted me to feel exposed. It worked. That one sentence broke through a wall I didn't realize I'd built around myself. I wasn't untouchable. I wasn't even hidden. I was just lucky. And luck runs out. I went for a walk after that. First time in days. The streets felt too bright. The people too loud. I kept my head down. Every noise sounded like a question. Every glance felt like recognition. I wasn't being followed, not yet. But that didn't matter. Paranoia doesn't need evidence. It only needs imagination. Back home, I pulled the shades tighter. I unplugged smart devices. I shut down voice assistants, wiped a laptop I hadn't used in weeks, and smashed one of the burner phones just to hear it break. I turned off notifications, silenced alerts. I didn't want to know anymore. The bots kept running, of course. The money didn't stop. That was the curse. Even after being warned, I didn't pull the plug. I couldn't. The system was too well-oiled, too profitable. And somewhere beneath the fear, there was still hunger. Not for money, not anymore, for control, for the illusion of safety. I started checking my reflection more often. Not out of vanity, but because I didn't recognize the person I had become. I looked older, thinner. My skin had a permanent tint of artificial light. My eyes didn't settle on anything for long. I slept on the couch most nights, though sleep is a generous word for what actually happened. I closed my eyes and drifted through static. Sometimes I'd think of Emily, and not in the romantic way. I thought about whether she knew, if she had seen something I missed. Maybe the message wasn't the first crack in the shell. Maybe it was just the first one I couldn't ignore. I kept the message. I didn't delete it. I wanted to believe that as long as it sat there, untouched, nothing worse would follow, as if ignoring the signal could stop the threat from growing. But the effect was immediate. I stopped trusting the network. I audited every tool, every wallet, every alias. I started purging code I had relied on for months. I wrote new versions of scripts by hand. I stopped using external packages, compiled everything locally, sandboxed all processes. I cut off contact with half the Discord groups I'd been part of. Some of them noticed. One even asked if I'd been compromised. I didn't respond. I was too busy tightening the walls. The only thing I didn't stop was the withdrawals. I kept pulling money. Smaller amounts, staggered, never to the same place twice. I was unraveling my own system in slow motion, dismantling it from the inside. Not because I wanted to stop, but because I knew it was ending. And I didn't know what came after. I had built this world around a simple belief that if I could stay a few steps ahead, I could live without consequences. But I wasn't ahead anymore. I was being followed, tracked, or at least seen. And there was no one left to ask for help. I hadn't talked to a real friend in over a year. My family still thought I was working contract jobs. The only people who knew my name were buried in spreadsheets and transaction logs. I had created a perfect vacuum, airtight, quiet, and inescapable. That night, I logged out of everything and sat in the dark. No screens, no sound. Just me and the memory of what I used to be. I didn't regret the money. I regretted who I became to get it. And I knew, finally, that the bill was coming due. I told myself it was just a precaution, that I wasn't running, that I was simply being careful, strategic, prepared. But the truth was clear long before I bought the ticket. I was fleeing because I couldn't stop. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the walls were closing in, even if no one had knocked yet. I liquidated everything slowly. Not all at once. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. Small numbers through quiet chains, split between stablecoins, washed and mixed and laundered into wallets that couldn't be traced unless someone really knew where to look. I burned through mixers until I trusted none of them. I rerouted cold wallets through third parties and slipped them into fresh hardware, wiped and encrypted and stored far from my apartment. I told myself I'd be back in a month. Just needed time to think. to breathe, to figure out my next move. But I knew I wasn't coming back. There was nothing here. Not anymore. The apartment had stopped being a home long before Emily left. Now it was just a quiet monument to every lie I had told, every life I had faked. I left most of it behind. I packed one backpack and one hard case. Clothes, the laptops, a few USBs. Everything else could burn. In some ways, it already had. I bought the ticket with a fake ID tied to a wallet I'd preloaded weeks ago, back when I first started to feel the walls shift. One-way flight direct to Mexico City. Not because it was safe or familiar, but because it was large and anonymous and warm. I figured if I disappeared into the noise of a place where no one asked questions, I might finally stop feeling like a target. The airport felt like a test I had trained for. Every face a mirror, every gate a checkpoint in my mind. I passed through security with the ease of a man who had done his homework. No eye contact, no nerves, no hesitation. I had studied the posture of normal. Now I wore it like a suit. On the plane, I stared out the window and thought about the last year of my life. I tried to track the moment where I lost control, but it was like trying to pinpoint the second water becomes steam. The change wasn't sudden. It was slow and constant and irreversible. I landed in the thick heat of afternoon. The city was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, dense and unbothered and filled with noise that didn't care who I was. I found a place to stay, short-term, paid in cash. I walked through neighborhoods I couldn't name, trying to remind myself what it felt like to exist without hiding. It didn't work. I set up a workstation in the corner of the room. Basic gear, just enough to stay connected. I didn't touch the money at first. I just watched it. 3 hardware wallets stored in different places, balances intact, clean as I could make them. Over $180,000 in stablecoin value, quiet and obedient. It should have felt like security, it didn't. I tried to imagine what a life might look like here. Maybe something small. Coffee shops in the morning, walks in the evening, conversations in a language I barely understood. Maybe I'd learn to paint or write or finally read all the books I'd told myself I was too busy for. That version of me sounded almost human. I knew I wouldn't become him. The first week passed in a blur. I stayed indoors more than I should have. My skin started to pale under fluorescent lights again. I watched the crypto markets, but only passively. I no longer cared if they rose or fell. I had what I needed, or at least what I thought I needed. I tried dating again. I met a woman in a bar not far from where I was staying. She was smart, funny, clearly skeptical. We spent a few nights together. It felt good to be touched again, even if I couldn't remember what I said to make her laugh. I never told her my real name. She never asked. That silence between us felt familiar. Not intimate, just familiar. Eventually, she stopped responding. I didn't follow up. Some nights, I dreamed about the apartment. Not as it was when I left, but how it used to be, when Emily lived there. When the couch had her blanket on it and the windows were open and there was the sound of life happening in the background. I woke up from those dreams feeling weightless, and then the weight returned all at once. I kept checking the wallets. I didn't spend from them, just watched. It was all I had left of the life I had destroyed. Proof that I had been clever enough to win, clever enough to cheat, but never clever enough to walk away. Every now and then I'd open the email again, the one that started it all. Still sitting there, untouched, like a sealed letter I refused to burn. You're not as invisible as you think. I read it like scripture, a warning, a prophecy, a mirror. I started to feel watched again, even in a new city, even among strangers. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just my own guilt folding in on itself. But every time I stepped outside, I moved a little quicker, took new routes, kept my back to walls. I stopped connecting to Wi-Fi in public. I turned off cameras. I stopped using any device I hadn't built myself. The paranoia was back, and this time it had no source. I thought money would buy me peace. What it bought was silence. But silence isn't peace. It's just a place to listen to your own thoughts louder, I had what most people dream of: freedom, mobility, financial insulation, and yet I hadn't felt safe in months. Not from law enforcement, not from hackers, from myself. I had become my own threat model, and deep down I knew something was coming. I didn't write this to be forgiven. I'm not asking for understanding, sympathy, or absolution. I don't think I'm owed any of that. I'm writing this because there's no one left to tell. No one who still knows the version of me that wasn't hollow. There's a moment in every lie where you forget you're lying. Not because the lie becomes truth, but because it becomes more real than whatever you left behind. I crossed that point long ago. It happened quietly, like a door clicking shut behind me while I wasn't looking. I used to think I was doing this for survival, that it was necessity, that I was backed into a corner and found a clever way out. But I wasn't in a corner. I was impatient. I didn't want to struggle like everyone else. I didn't want to wait, so I built a shortcut. And I told myself it was a system, a method, a victimless crime. There were victims, of course. I see that now, even if I didn't then. Maybe not in the casinos themselves. They were designed to exploit people. But the people feeding into them? The gamblers, the addicts, the ones who never stood a chance? I took from them. Indirectly, maybe. But I was part of the mechanism that bled them dry. I used to watch the user dashboards. I'd see bets come in from someone new, some fresh deposit hitting a wallet, and I knew within minutes how long they'd last. Most folded quickly, some lingered, some chased losses, some deposited again. And I took. Not from a face, not from a person, from a number on a screen. That's how I justified it. But now I think about the other side. What kind of person puts their rent into a crypto dice game? What kind of pain makes someone believe that this is how they'll turn their life around? I was one of them once. Not the exact same, but close enough. Desperate. Tired, waiting for a shortcut to appear. The only difference is I found one. And instead of escaping, I became the trap. I think about Emily often. Not every day, not in some romantic fantasy, but she returns when I least expect it, in the shape of a mug in a cafe, in the sound of a laugh that doesn't belong to her but almost does, in the space on the couch where someone else might sit if I had made different choices. She doesn't haunt me exactly, but her absence does. I don't blame her for leaving. She stayed longer than most would have. She saw who I was becoming and didn't wait around to watch the full collapse. She was smarter than me in that way. Stronger, too. I wonder if she ever looked back, if she ever typed my name into a search bar, just to see if I got arrested or disappeared. I hope she didn't. I hope she kept going. The money's still there. I haven't touched most of it. I could live off it for years if I wanted to. Quietly, anonymously, I have the tools. I know the routes, but that's not what I want anymore. I don't even know what I want. Freedom doesn't mean much when there's no one left to share it with. I thought I was escaping the system, that I was playing a better game, one where I set the rules, but all I did was trade one prison for another. In the old world, I was broke, stuck, invisible. In this one, I'm rich, untouchable, and still invisible. But now I see that invisibility isn't power. It's erasure. Sometimes I think about walking into a police station and handing them everything. The code, the wallets, the logs, the truth. Just to see what they'd do. But I never follow through, not out of fear, out of emptiness. I don't think punishment would change anything. I've already lost what mattered. So I write this instead. Not to make it right. Just to put it somewhere outside my head. Maybe someone will read it. Maybe no one will. That's fine. I don't need an audience. I just need a record. I cheated, I stole, I lied. I built something I was proud of and let it rot me from the inside. I had someone who loved me, and I made her a stranger. I chose power over peace, speed over honesty, control over love. And I lost everything I didn't realize I valued until it was gone. This is my confession. You don't need to forgive me. I won't forgive myself.